Happiness through curiosity on the Ranveer Show. You had highlighted demonetization as one of the mistakes of the current government, probably the biggest economic mistake, and you broke it down. I think the consensus of that answer was that the intention behind demonetization was to reduce the usage of black money, etc., and we didn't really achieve that um, mission statement. What about 2024 and maybe the last 4 years generally? You know, you've constantly brought up the book, and what I'm sensing is that the book is a way for you to express everything you've wanted to say for years, and you finally penned it down. But I also give you this platform, so because I don't know how often news media asks you questions like this, but this is going to be watched by millions of people. And just open up your heart, talk about what actually needs to be highlighted in terms of criticism of the current Indian government.
So I actually want to offer a positive message,
Sure.
which is to beat a model, you have to offer a model. The establishment has a very clear model of what they're trying to do. And it's focused, certainly on some economics, but also much on, giving people a greater sense of confidence, well-being, etc. And what I want to say is, there are other ways of giving people confidence, which doesn't involve pressing down on one community while elevating or making another community feel strong. Treating everybody equally, including everybody in the growth process. But to do that, we have to focus on those who are being left behind, give them more capabilities, give them more access to schooling, to healthcare, etc. I mean, just even in Delhi, which is full of hospitals, some poor person navigating the healthcare system, of course, has improved a lot today because of the Mohalla clinic, etc. But 5-10 years back was miserable, and of course, in many other areas, it's still very, very bad. So that's one part of it. But we also have to have ambition. We have to have ambition to grow really fast, to become a strong country, so that we can spread our values. But our values have to be those, our historical values of tolerance, of respect. We can be a different superpower. We don't have to be a superpower which suppresses others, like the current superpowers that we have, right? So how do we do that? How do we go with our values to the world and say, we want to embrace you in brotherhood, but we also want to be a really important country? And there we're saying, look, we can build on our strengths. And there is actually a path which is opening up, which didn't used to exist earlier. A path which is based on, intellectual property creation, on ideas, on creativity, on patents. These are the things that flourish in a society which is always debating, which is talking to each other, engaging each other, producing new ideas. Let us win that battle, because that's where the battle is being fought today. When you talk about AI, robotics, etc., you're talking about the battle for new ideas. And India has to win, but not win, but at least be a big part of that battle. So we ask, where are the Indian companies with great products like NVIDIA, Boeing, Tesla? We don't have those products. We need to create those products. Even the industries where we are successful, pharmaceuticals. We do generic products, which is imitating products of others. We ask in the book, I talked to Dr. Yusuf Hamid, great entrepreneur, built Cipla up. I asked him, why aren't you producing new drugs? He said, the problem is that in the West, big universities create the intellectual property, they innovate the drug, and then they give it to the pharmaceutical firm, which commercializes it. In India, I don't see that. If I am to invest in original R&D, it's too expensive for me. Where am I going to do that? We need to make it possible for the Ciplas to create new drugs. And for that, we have to create very strong universities. We don't have one university in the top 100. If we are to become a strong power, we need many more. So we need to build at the very top, the elite, the strong universities, the strong firms. We need to get the Nvidias, the Apples to be Indian companies. And we need to elevate at the bottom, because you can't have a bifurcation. For too long, we've had a bifurcation, the top moving away from the bottom being left behind. We need people who are poor to also be elevated. And that means focus on the fundamentals. The ultimate problem with policy always is too short term. Some element has to be short term. Today, the biggest short term issue is jobs. We need a short term plan to create many more jobs. If you talk about failings, this has been the most important failing over the last 15 years.
Not enough jobs.
Not enough jobs. And you can see this. The number of applicants for IAS jobs tripled because there are no other jobs available. Even though there are only, maybe 1,000 civil service positions, we've got 11 lakhs applying for those 1,000 positions. Railway jobs, 19 million applying for 60,000 jobs. You see civil engineers working as waiters. Why is there this? Because there are not enough jobs, but also people aren't well trained for the job. A lot of manufacturers say, I can't find workers. 1.4 billion people and you can't find workers? Yeah, because nobody is well trained. So we need to upskill people much more. That has to be an immediate focus. In other words, what we're saying is there's a path forward. It requires a lot of work. It ultimately implies we focus on the brains of Indians. It's the brains that will make us truly. I have seen, and we give an example in the book, of people going from poverty to wealthy in one generation simply because of education. So, for example, this fellow Mustafa in the book, father's a laborer, picking up ginger root. And Mustafa goes to school, fails in 6th grade. This is the typical problem for many of our kids. They enter school, they aren't able to keep up, they fail out. Dropout rates are too high. He fails, his teacher comes, pulls him back from the farm and says, don't stay on the farm, come back to school. He goes back to school, all his friends laugh at him. Aap wapas aa gaye, who are you? I mean, you failed. And his teacher says, be calm, focus on one thing you can do well. He studies, does well in math, tops the class, suddenly gets the admiration of the students, then tops school, goes to NIT. That's the beauty of the system. You can actually, there are public institutions which are cheap, you can go to, becomes an engineer, comes back to IIM Bangalore, wants to start a enterprise, starts one, making idli batter, idli mao, and sells it widely, and now runs a firm with 2,500 people. He tries to employ people like him. He says, I need to give others a chance. That's the entrepreneurship which can happen in one generation. Laborer's son becomes a wealthy man, but is giving back. And we can get so many entrepreneurs, we can push so many people out of poverty if we focus on the right things. And what we're saying is there is a lack of focus, which we need to remedy today. Today, we are more interested in getting some chip manufacturer to come and pay $10 billion to get them in. Today, we're paying $2 billion to get Micron into Gujarat. For what? 5,000 jobs. That's a mismatch. You told me earlier. What is economics about? Trying to find the right use of resources. $2 billion to get somebody to assemble chips in India is a waste of resources. $2 billion spent in improving the quality of colleges so that the students coming out from those colleges get a good job, getting many more good teachers into the colleges, getting much more sort of apprenticeships so that these kids actually do something that is useful for industry. All that would be a much better spending, and that would enable us to get many more jobs.
Okay. So all in all, more focus should be given on jobs. I'd also argue that in order to create more jobs, I think what you're trying to say is more focus needs to be given to entrepreneurial thinking, which again, the extreme right as well as the current government would say that they're already doing. Like, I'm sure if I relay all these points to anyone in the current government or associated with the current government, they would say, nahi, ye sab to ho raha hi hai.
Yeah, what they're not doing. So two things. What they're not doing is focusing on the other part of the fundamental. Creating a worker that is much more employable, or creating the entrepreneur from the grassroots, which means much more focus on education, much more focus on healthcare. Let me give you an example of where that attention hasn't been paid. What happened during the pandemic? A lot of children were out of school. A lot of these children basically have lost learning. If there's a report called the RAAAZ report, which measures how much children learn. By that report, we are back to 2012 levels in terms of learning in the schools, right? In some, according to some metrics. That is a worrisome feature, because if you're going to compete in the 21st century, you better have educated workers, right? Not only did we not have adequate for them, it's gone worse in this pandemic cohort. What that requires is a massive, massive effort to uplift the kids already in school. That requires spending. Some states are doing it. A lot of states are not, especially the poorest states. That requires a whole of country effort, which only the central government can give. And so that's where you say, you don't keep saying everything is fine. You look at the problem, identify the problem, and act upon it. The government has produced a good report, the National Education Policy. But implementation has lagged. The government implements a lot of things. We need to implement the national education policy sooner rather than later.
What's happening with the national education policy right now?
Stuck.
Because of lack of execution.
It has not been implemented, yes.
Who implements it?
Well, I presume some combination of the center and the states have to get together. Some of it is about things that are entirely within the center's control, which is there are many colleges which are too small, which can't afford adequate teachers. So the policy prescribes merging some of those colleges. Now that sort of comes up against a lot of vested interests. There are lots of politicians who run colleges who don't want those colleges merged with others. They're making fees from those. So you need to break all that. And clearly, we have a government which has a political power to do that. We should be doing much more.
My understanding was that the bureaucracy actually executes all these things, like IAS officers, IPS officers, etc. Like they make things happen on the ground.
They do, but they get directions from the political establishment. And the political establishment, again and again, when it works, basically says, what happened to this? Not yet. Okay, better do it, otherwise you're out. I'll transfer you.
So at the end of the day, the party in power will decide where the country goes. And I think the overarching criticism here is that we've not generated as many jobs as we could have generated in the last 10 years.
I think it's a longer standing issue. I won't say it's just the last 10 years, but there was a promise. We will generate 2 crore jobs per month. There's a guarantee. That guarantee has not been fulfilled. In fact, we've gone the other way. So one of the most frightening numbers, I'll use the word frightening, which again we mentioned in the book, is that the employment in agriculture as a share of total employment has been going up. No developing country which is growing at 6-7% a year should see employment in the old sector going up, because productivity in agriculture is very low. There's not enough land. Why are more people going to agriculture? Because they cannot find jobs in services or industry. In fact, if you look, employment in services has been coming down. Employment in manufacturing has been coming down. The only place where employment share has been going up is agriculture and construction. Construction, give credit to the government. It's been doing a lot of construction. That has been helpful. But the other 2 areas, which is where a modern economy needs more people, employment has been coming down.
Okay. Can we approach this from a slightly solution-oriented mindset?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because again, I remember in one of your past conversations, you spoke about creative disruption. You basically said that creativity is a strength that Indians have. We need to play to our own strength. Like, what is ISRO in the first place? It's jugaad at play. And jugaad comes out of creativity.
Yeah.
So I'm going to apply those same rules to this conversation. Now, I've often seen in my own entrepreneurial journey that I've pitched an idea and it sounds like something far-fetched, but maybe entrepreneurs are optimistic inherently, which is why it always sounds nice to me. And this is one of those moments. I personally feel that content and content creation as a long-term career is kind of like a chef's job. You're serving food all the time. Okay, and then eventually people will also forget what you've served 2 years ago. But the actual usage of content creation as a skill that can help the country is if we're able to spread education digitally. Because I remember speaking to Sanjeev Sanyal, I think, about this, where he said that entrepreneurs also have a very, very big role to play in the nation's story. Everything is not down to the government and policymakers. You need a lot of entrepreneurs in the country to actually make the change.
Right.
I personally see this as a pretty solvable problem. It might be a far-fetched thought.
Yeah.
And I say that because if YouTube and Big Boss has reached corners of the country, why can't skill-based education also reach there?
Yeah.
Of course, you can't make the practical side of it reach there, but you can make a lot of depths of theory reach those parts of the country. You can even make mindset reach parts of the country, etc., etc. Is that a practical solution, or am I being over-optimistic?
No, there is an organizational process, but you're absolutely right that digital and technology offers us lots of scope for solutions, right? To make much better schools. So one example, we met this entrepreneur who's basically started a school system called Orchids. Many people have been to good public schools, Columbus, DPS, etc. How do you recreate those schools in a big way, right? Very hard, because they have teachers who've, grown in the system and they've built a reputation over time. What he does is he got 37,000 plus lesson plans put together for each lesson that a teacher will give. Like you're doing your podcast fantastically with videos and this and that. He knows that the maximum people will listen to a video, the short form video, is 3 minutes. So in his lesson plan, there's a 3-minute video. Then there is, the teacher sort of raises some question. There's a debate. Every lesson plan is written out for every subject. And then teachers are recruited to deliver this. And there's instant feedback. End of the lesson, students type in, there's a lot of technology used, but it's a mix of human and technology. Without the teacher, students won't learn. With the teacher, there's a scripted process by which the learning takes place. And you get, maybe not quite Columbus, I don't know, but you get pretty close to top-level public schools. But this is totally scalable. He has, at this point, I think he has 63,000 students in schools. I may get the number a little wrong. 63,000 is like 63 St. Columbus. And he has another 350,000 schools who have bought his process. It turns out when you do studies, and I'm not talking about his particular system, but in other countries, when you do studies on this kind of scripted system, it works very well in improving people's students' education level. Why? Because the teacher has to follow and has to complete this thing, but it's properly timed. Teacher doesn't have to run through it, and the student constantly is tested to see how much they learned, helped if they fall behind. One of the biggest problems we have in class is students falling behind, not understanding what is taught in class. So this is where one way of preventing them from falling behind, they get remedial tuition during the week if they fall behind. There's another way. If we're looking forward, think about artificial intelligence bots. So there's a teacher in a school who's teaching 50 students. Now, teacher will teach maybe 10 students in the middle will be very interested. They'll get it. Teacher is teaching at too low a level for the smartest students. So maybe 10 students will get bored and they will not pay too much attention, but they're good enough, they'll get it. The bottom 30 or 40 students basically are falling behind. They don't understand. And once they don't understand even more. And it's all Greek to them or Tamil to them or whatever. They don't understand what is being taught in class and they drop out. How do you keep them on board? Well, we need tutors. Now 30% of kids in school today are being tutored. But what if we had tutors for every kid, even in a poor government school, because we could have cheap artificial intelligence bots? You type in the question and, kids learn how to type very quickly, etc. You type in the question, you get the answer. Acha, I didn't understand what Pythagoras theorem was. Please explain it. You get a detailed explanation, much like Khan Academy or somebody would give, and you learn. So technology allows us the possibility of improving the quality of teaching tremendously. And the hope is, if we can spread this around the country, we have a solution. Through a mix of entrepreneurship, good old style teachers, but aided by the scripts, by the kind of bots. I mean, this is not far-fetched. I talk to people at Pratham, which works with the poorest kids. And they tell me technology has been very useful.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip from The Ranveer Show, we've uploaded a ton of other clips related to a ton of other topics. So explore the channel because there's something for everyone.